Welcome guys back to Halloween month. Last time I reviewed Psycho from the 1960s and I reviewed Alien from the 1970s. Now we are going to go to probably one of my favorite years in horror movies, the 80s. 80s has so many of my favorite horror movies of all time, and there's a lot of those to review in this month. And of course, we're going to start off that with talking about one of the most iconic movies of all time. And it's one of those movies that's very, very interesting from the behind the scenes, from the reviews, but this turned out to be one of my favorite movies of all time. That movie is The Shining. This movie is directed by another great director, Stanley Kubrick. 2001: A Space Odyssey. He's very, very talented. Clockwork Orange, very disturbing movie. But of course, it's like Alien with Ridley Scott. The Shining is one of his most iconic movies. With 2001, of course 2001 is one of the most revolutionary movies ever made, but The Shining is definitely my favorite out of his film career. Now, this is a really interesting movie because what happens behind the scenes and what happens when this movie was released. The Shining, when it was released, people hated it, or at least people were controversial by this movie. And this movie even got Razzie Awards. Yeah, Stanley Kubrick was nominated for Worst Director. Shelley, hopefully I said her name right, got nominated for Worst Actress. So this movie was hated before it was loved. And another interesting fact is that Stephen King himself, because this movie was adapted from Stephen King's novel with the same name, Stephen King hated this movie. He hates this movie still. He doesn't like how Stanley Kubrick directed this film and all that stuff. I think The Shining is one of the most interesting movies ever made, especially from the critics' reviews and all that stuff. But then the movie just gets loved and loved more, and turns out to be, of course, one of my favorite horror movies of all time. The Shining, of course, this movie was fantastic. But it's one of those horror movies that's not like any other horror movies I have seen. Out of any horror movie I've ever seen, this is probably some of the best cinematography I have ever seen in a horror movie. Right from the start of this movie, where you see basically where the Overlook Hotel is, that whole cinematography scene, the mountains, that whole, I don't know what that shot is called, it's like the following type shot, looks like some drone shot or something like that, I don't know what it's called, but it just gets you in. And it shows that the Overlook Hotel basically is in the middle of nowhere, there's no contact for help, it's in the middle of nowhere basically. And you see this family, played by Jack Nicholson, Shelley, Duvall, Lloyd, basically staying in this hotel. Because Jack Nicholson's character needed a place to write, he's an old school teacher, and you find out that this hotel basically has a violent past and it's haunted. And Danny in the movie, he finds out he has the shine, it's this very haunting telepathic ability. So things go crazy in the hotel. And I feel like the story of this movie is handled so original and differently. And I have not read the book of The Shining by Stephen King, but since Stephen King hates the vision of the film, I'm more curious to read the book to see how different it is to this film. But of course, I love The Shining. I always loved The Shining. From the very beginning, I loved the movie because it's different. It's not like any other horror films that's very cliche with really dumb characters and all that stuff. Most of these horror movies that I'm reviewing, these are the characters that need to be in horror movies now. Characters that we root for, characters that we loved. But I think what's different in The Shining in this movie is that there are characters that we don't root for. We slowly don't root for. Especially one of the best performances that I have seen in a horror movie, Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance. His performance in this movie, wow. He starts off from this ordinary man that is a school teacher and he wants to write in this hotel, to this really crazy lunatic.
Don't hurt me.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
Stay away from me.
Wendy.
Stay away.
Darling. Light of my life. I'm not gonna hurt you. You didn't let me finish my sentence. I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in. I'm gonna bash them right the fuck in.
And some people could say like Jack Nicholson's performance is just way too over the top and very, very nuts. But I see that's what Stanley Kubrick was trying to do. He's trying to make his performance really edgy, really intense, and mind-blowing and crazy. And Jack Nicholson, I couldn't think of anyone else that could play Jack Torrance as crazy and as lunatic as well as Jack Nicholson. And I'm just like, where is Jack Nicholson now? He's such a good actor. He's been in so many great movies. So where is he now? But of course The Shining is one of his most iconic performances. Probably the movie that brings Jack Nicholson on the map. Now let's talk about Shelley Duvall for a minute. Now, again, like I said, Shelley Duvall has got a Razzie Award, like nominated from a Razzie Award for Worst Actress. And some people hate her in the film because she's way too over the top. There are times that she basically looks like she doesn't want to be in the film. But if you guys read about The Shining, you heard that her and Stanley Kubrick don't really have a great chemistry. I heard a lot of rumors that, you know, he abuses Shirley.
There's no desperation. Oh, come on. What do you mean roll
2
video?
seconds.
We're killing ourselves out here, and you're going to be ready.
I am too. I'm standing
So we
right
play
by
mood
the
music?
door. No, I
Yeah,
can't
but when
hear.
you came in like this, you said just
We're sitting there because they say, wait a minute,
okay.
and then you say
Yeah,
on the radio,
but when you
go.
do it, you've got to look desperate, Shelley. You're just wasting everybody's time there.
Or even a really interesting one is that Stanley does that, like abuses her to get her character in the film. Something that's really intense, now that you think about it. I liked her performance in this film. At times, yes, she goes a bit over the top, and she sounds very, very cheesy. But she's convincing. Like, I love that scene with Here's Johnny, and you see her face. She looks terrified. I thought her performance was great in the film, for the most part, and I don't understand why people hated her. I get why, but I liked her in this film. She does sound very convincing. Speaking of convincing characters, Danny Lloyd playing Danny in this film is probably some of the best kid acting I have ever seen in this film. He basically brings a performance that felt like one of the most realistic performances I've seen in a horror film. You see his face, and you can see he is terrified. He is basically very, very convincing in this film. Of course, with the scene with the twins, which is, of course, one of the most iconic scenes in The Shining, that scene always creeps me out every single time. His face in the film, you see his face, and you can see that he looks terrified. You don't seem like he is acting, you can see that he looks terrified in real life. That's how convincing this movie is with the characters, and especially how this movie was filmed was fantastic, and it works in this film. The Shining presents basically a lot of wide shots. Like, you see the whole hotel, and it's massive, and you can see that it's only the family that is basically staying in this hotel. There's no one else around. So with that twin scene, it just grips you. It scares you, because like, oh, they're not the only ones. There's other people in the hotel that we didn't know about. But most of this movie, of course, is wide shots. And the wide shots of this film was so effectively. And you can see, basically, the hotel in this film, how big it was. And the camera work in this film, of course, is fantastic. Still holds up to this day. And of course, the music in the film. Like I did in the beginning, the iconic theme, but also the sound effects as well. It's very, very edgy. It's very, very tenseful. And of course, this movie was scary, but not in the way that, you know, with jump scares and all that stuff. It's mostly the characters' emotions and how they feel in the situation they are in. And especially the whole setting of the film grips me. It gets me into the edge of my seat the entire freaking time. And of course, The Shining has some of the most iconic scenes in a horror film. Like I said before, the twin scene was creepy. Of course, Here's Johnny. That scene, of course. If you just hear that quote, you guess, yep, it's from The Shining.
Here's Johnny.
Now, fun fact about that scene. Now, it's not a fun fact about the film, but it's a fun fact about me reacting to that scene. When I was little, I saw that scene on TV. Now, I haven't watched The Shining when I was a kid. I just saw that scene on TV. It was like, I don't know if it was like a commercial or something, but I had saw that scene on TV. And for some weird reason, I thought that this is Angels or Filthy Souls from Home Alone. Because the guy in the film is Johnny. I was a dumb kid, I didn't know it was a fake film, I didn't know it wasn't The Shining. I just thought of that in a weird way. I thought that's what Home Alone was trying to copy. It was trying to copy The Shining in a weird way, which is basically both about a man that goes really, really insane, which I want that movie to come in real life. But of course, Here's Johnny is one of the best quotes in a horror movie. Of course. It's just one of the most greatest quotes. But another iconic scene is the maze scene, the snowy maze scene at the end, where of course that's when Jack goes really, really crazy and he chases Danny into the maze, and that scene was tension. It was tension filled. That scene was so terrifying. It just grips you, because you see this ordinary man from the beginning of the film going insane, going crazy, that makes you think, holy shit, there's no one else that could do this performance except Jack Nicholson. Like, come on. Guys, The Shining has always been one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I would say this is one of the best filmed horror movies of all time. This is one of the most terrifying horror films. Of course, this movie has great performances. Some of them are mixed bag, but of course, Jack Nicholson just brings this film on the map. Of course, The Shining is definitely, out of any 80s horror films, it's probably my favorite. And I think it's one of the best out of Stanley Kubrick's movies. This film was tension, it was thrilling, still holds up till today. I would say The Shining is one of my favorite movies of all time. I don't know if it's in my top 30 list. I don't know. I don't remember what I put in my top 30 list. That's even more embarrassing. So guys, that is my review for Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Let me know what you think of this movie in the comments below. Do you like the movie? Hate the movie? Or you thought it's okay? Just let me know in the comments below. Make sure you guys follow me on Facebook, Stardust, Instagram, Twitter. Keep contacting me, and make sure you guys subscribe to my channel. I'm notified for my latest movie reviews. And have a nice day.
Death by stereo.